Now that the X-Men 97 is a smash hit, the question is, can Marvel now bring the X-Men into the MCU in the same way to revitalize the franchise? Now, I'm going to take this question as both a professional writer and a producer and show you what the goal should be to get people back in the seats and interested in the MCU again. And if you like what you hear, please remember to like and subscribe. Now, first off, what will make the MCU X-Men different than both the Fox's X-Men and X-Men 97 is that they will be sharing this universe and screen time with other Marvel characters that already exist in the universe. This is the only place where the Avengers, Fantastic Four, X-Men, and more can meet on a regular, constant basis and make it a big event. Yes, sure, X-Men 97 can also bring other groups in, but they won't be anywhere near as constant with it and consistent with it as the MCU can be. Because keep in mind, MCU is all about expanding the universe. X-Men 97 is all about telling X-Men 97 stories. So there's a difference. So this leads to the first thing that must happen. We must get people back interested in what's going on with the existing members in the Marvel Universe. That is the only way this can proceed forward. Now, the question then becomes, how do you get people back interested again when a lot of people have fallen off of the MCU? And they're no longer interested in seeing what Captain Marvel has to offer in her own solo movie, or what the Young Avengers can do, or even how Sam Wilson is going to be the next Captain America. People just generally don't seem interested. So how do you get them back in? And the method is simple. Keep in mind, I'm thinking as a producer, how you get people back in. What you do is for every Avengers solo movie you have, you put an X-Men in it. And this gives you two things you do that makes it different than before. One, people will be interested in it automatically because they want to see what you do with the X-Men, so they'll watch it. And two, this gives you the opportunity to really give the X-Men the Avengers treatment by having each X-Men have a standalone adventure before joining forces and forming the X-Men. And this would solve the first problem that the Fox X-Men had, where they only had time to centralize onto one character and everybody else felt like side notes. No, because since everybody else had their own individual adventure, all the characters would be well rounded even before the first X-Men movie even starts. So now the question becomes, how do we put these individual X-Men in one of the existing Avengers movie without us seeming ham-fisted, us just pushing these people in just to push them in? And the great thing about it is many of the X-Men have historical ties to many of the Avengers in one shape or form or another, or they have enough of a relation where you can put them together. For example, Rogue has very strong ties to Captain Marvel as she gained some of her abilities through Captain Marvel. So she would be a perfect person to put in a Captain Marvel movie. Also, Miss Marvel is also seen sometimes as an X-Men in the more recent comics. So she also might be involved in that movie. Storm has some strong relations to Wakanda and Black Panther. So of course she would be best suited in a Black Panther movie. So now it becomes finding a perfect story for the individual stories that can fit both the Avengers to bring them back up to status quo of being something that we would like to see, while also being great X-Men stories as well, to introduce these X-Men characters and to pump them up to a status that we haven't seen before in either Fox's X-Men movies or the new popular X-Men 97. And this leads to both our second problem, but also the way that we can make it very different than Fox's X-Men and X-Men 97. And that is that in the MCU world, there is no reason to hate mutants. Think about it. Most of the people who are superpowered have always been seen as people who saves the day. In fact, people love to go over the superpower people, whether it be people who loving Thor or people who look up to people like Luke Cage or Steve Rogers' Captain America, which his superpower abilities were government sanctioned, or Jessica Jones or anyone else. They do not have animosity or fear of them. We look to them to save the people half the time, save us from any other threats that are endangering us. So why would they suddenly fear people like mutants if that is the case? It would take something enormous to happen for you to fear mutants for that reason. People like who we would usually be afraid of, like the Hulk, who used to be rampaging around, he's now been Professor Hulk for over 5 years. Everyone loves him. Kids come up to him. No one's afraid of the Hulk. Now, you may point to the Scarlet Witch and her little massacre that she did in Doctor Strange Multiverse of Madness and her little mental takeover of Westfield and WandaVision, but honestly, even those could be easily swept under the rug. The little WandaVision incident was easily, most likely, covered up by Sword after the event. So besides the few people who were actually in Westfield, who actually experienced it, no one else knows that exists. And Doctor Strange Multiverse of Madness, Wanda was a terror, sure, but most people she killed were from other planets, from other alternate realities. This reality saw her as a saint. Only other place she attacked here in this reality that people can really account for is at Doctor Strange's secluded, isolated temple. No one goes there except for people who are studying to be master sorcerers. So again, no one knows about Scarlet Witch's little terror journey across that temple and destroying everything. So still, by most people's eyes, she is seen as a good person. So again, there's no reason to be afraid of the mutants. Now, what people do fear a lot are people from the outside world coming into ours. Because the first person who did that was this person named Loki, who decimated a good chunk of New York City in his quest for power. And then the second person who come around doing that is a guy with a snap of his finger wiped out half of the population in the universe. So yeah, people outside of our world, there's great reason to fear them. There's great reason to have Avengers and any other team be ready to stop this ongoing threat to humanity, if you will. So what do you do then? Simple. You're doing this multiverse storyline anyway. Make the mutants come from another world. Have it be like that the mutants were coming from another world. They had to run to our world to escape some type of persecution. Days of Future Past stuff happening. Sentinels trying to do mutant massacres, whatever the case may be. Cause the mutants to run over to our world. And then we have to either give them asylum or we send them back. Basically, think of it as the MCU's version of the border control crisis. Now, I know what some of you are thinking. Why are you bringing real-world politics into this? Now, first off, sci-fi, fantasy, all of it are all metaphors of real-life stuff. We just cover it up in great fantastical settings. That's what grounds the story. That's what makes you relate to the story. But number two, it's not us putting outside politics into a story, but we are keeping it real based on what has come before in the Marvel Universe. Remember, this is Thanos' take. Thanos has said long ago that it was because of overpopulation that destroyed his planet. That's what made him seek out to wipe out half the galaxy, because he was trying to save the universe from overpopulation. And although we all can agree his method was wrong, the thing is, it doesn't take away from the problem. The problem still exists. And so what we are going to do is explore the problem and what route MCU Earth will take to solve this problem, if they even think they can solve this problem. Also, keep in mind, Marvel has already given us a great vehicle by having Thor's as Guardians people now living on Earth because their planet got destroyed. And now Skrulls are also shown living on Earth because they couldn't find another habitable world as well. So even though they did in the Marvels, but some of them did not. So they're still on Earth. And this can cause a great overpopulation. And now if you have mutants now coming in to Earth, seeking asylum, trying to hide, trying to make their way in, then guess what? We might have more people than our resources can allow. We have a Thanos issue. And now people may have a face to blame, to be the mutants. Now we can have animosity toward a group of people who are coming in, or many of them illegally, some of them not. Some of them seeking asylum, some of them looking for terrorize, some of them looking for profit. And how do we deal with that issue? And to make matters worse, we can even tell another second story as well with the mutants, might as well since we're doing it, which can also involve a little bit of the story that we couldn't get from Nick Fury was the Secret Invasion storyline. But instead of the Skrulls taking over our group of people, we can have alternate variants taking over our people, some of our people, and swapping them out while at the same time the mutant issue is happening. And it can lead to a great different element of who should be blamed, who should be saved, and how to deal with this issue. Because again, unlike X-Men 97, we can expand the storyline of the mutant issue and make it mesh with other existing storylines that cannot usually happen because X-Men 97 is more of a contained saga, whereas MCU X-Men is more of an expansion of the ongoing sagas that's happening. So yes, we can deal with the mutant issue at one point, but also deal with this new secret invasion of these variants taking over the people, and we don't know who's who. And all thing we can do is blame the mutants for what's going on because none of this happened before they came. So now you have interesting issues. And by the way, if you want to see how that can work a little bit more, I had told 9 stories, or actually 10 stories of this, and I will be happy to share that on my link below of 10 pictures of how you can do a whole through line of the X-Men and show you how they can come together, form, and how that will work for each movie, as well as bump the existing Avengers up. But also the other different things that can happen with the MCU X-Men is that, especially if you take the picture of the mutants coming from an alternate world, then you can explore Magneto's relationship with the Scarlet Witch and explore that venue, because now you have a Scarlet Witch who's always been looking for a family, now possibly can have one with Magneto, who in his alternate world having a daughter named Wanda, and his Wanda died by people who hated mutants. And this gives him a second chance with this Wanda. And Wanda as well finds herself finding a second chance as well, because although Magneto's Wanda had died, Magneto's son Quicksilver had lived through the process. And Wanda can find a chance to reignite with her brother again. And yes, this is not her actual brother because her brother actually died. But as we can tell from Doctor Strange Multiverse of Madness, Scarlet Witch does not really need a direct relation to form an attachment to someone as she trying to get kids from an alternate world. So she would probably gladly try to form some sort of attachment of having a chance to have a family with her brother again and possibly have a strange, different relationship with Magneto. And this leads to different complications because depending on where Magneto's and Quicksilver allegiance go, if they go somewhat evil at times, this can cause Wanda to have to choose. Will she follow her father's and brother's path to going evil, or will she try to fight them and stop them? Especially since, yes, although the whole world may think of her as a saint, in superhero world, we all know that the massacre she did. So they would know, and they would be a little bit wary on Wanda, giving her that extra layer of, well, she doesn't really belong with the Avengers anymore. Maybe she might want to join Magneto and other cause or toward the X-Men cause, or maybe she can refine herself with the Avengers. And this can give a different conflict that, frankly, X-Men 97 cannot do because they have not developed Scarlet Witch yet. Whereas in the MCU world, we have developed Scarlet Witch so intimately that we can discuss this portion a lot deeper. Another story you can play with the X-Men universe is that because of Wanda's condition, you can play with the story of the no more mutants word that she used that get rid of the majority of the mutant population. And you can see the ramifications of it not only for the X-Men world, but the world, MCU world generally, when she makes that type of statement. How will that affect everyone? How will that affect all the heroes one way or the other? So you can explore these type of dimensions very well with the No More Mutants era, and of course, its sequel portion of it, which is the Mutant Messiah, how that affects things. Because for those who explore the comics, it got everybody involved, not just X-Men, but also Avengers and others became more involved of the whole Mutant Messiah. So you can explore that. And like I said, these type of stories can only really be told if it's in an expanding universe like the MCU, much better than it can if it's just X-Men 97. Now, the other element you want to make it different than both the Fox's X-Men and X-Men 97 is no Xavier. What do you mean, no Xavier? He's the heart of the team. And yes, his message is the heart of the team. And this is why you have no Xavier. You want to show, can the message survive after the person is gone? And have him be lost. Maybe you can bring him back a little bit later or a lot later, but have him be not present and see if the X-Men can stand on their own without Xavier. Stand based on his teachings, but not the man present. And this was actually done in the 80s and 90s. And he was going for a long stretch of time in the comics. We'll play up on that a little bit because nobody has really seen that in live action or in animation, really. We want to show how the group can survive without Xavier long term. Also, another way to differentiate yourself from the other groups is by changing the leadership a little bit. Fox X-Men explored Cyclops as the leader. Not well, but they did explore Cyclops as the leader. X-Men 97 explored Magneto a little bit more. This version explores Storm as the leader of the X-Men and show us what makes her tick and how she lead. Because we never seen that before. Now, people may ask, well, what happened to our boy Cyclops? Because he never got his real time to show himself either. X-Men 97 is doing a better job, but the Fox X-Men never really gave us a good live version of Cyclops. We will show Cyclops in this version, MCU version as well. However, we would show him in a way a little bit later on after Storm has had a footing, and then you can have a real debate on who should be the leader of the X-Men. Should it be Cyclops or Storm? So if I had my way, I would have both Storm and Cyclops co-lead the X-Men team. And this gives us an interesting dynamic because first and foremost, X-Men is a family. And this family would be led by like a two-parent household, if you will, Storm and Cyclops. And this gives us an opportunity to see how they deal with each issue as individuals and how they pull and tug at each other to see how best the X-Men should be handled, how best to handle Xavier's legacy. And it gives opportunity to flesh out, see where each side is coming from, see where the compromises can be, and see how they both lead as individuals and as a group, and how they lead their family through the obstacles that life will bring them, from people hating mutants to other mutants posing a problem and to everything else in between, into every regular day life. So another way the MCU X-Men can be different than both the X-Men 97 and the Fox X-Men is how they handle Jean Grey. See, in most stories, when they did Jean Grey, they obviously end up doing the Phoenix Saga. And Fox X-Men did the Phoenix Saga twice. Not well, but they did do it twice. So it almost seemed redundant for the MCU X-Men to repeat the Phoenix Saga. Even X-Men 97 had touched the Phoenix Saga within X-Men the animated series, which keep in mind they're together. And so they even touched the Phoenix Saga in their own way as well. So again, it seems redundant for the MCU X-Men to also touch upon the Phoenix Saga yet again. So how do you do it? How do you handle that element of Jean Grey that is synonymous with Jean Grey in a lot of ways? Simple. Because since we do this in an alternate world anyway, we can have Jean Grey already have experienced the Phoenix Saga. In her world, she not only has experienced the Phoenix Saga, she killed billions of people on another planet, and she's responsible for it. She did all this. So this already happened before we even really met her. So now her issue is she does not want to ever utilize her abilities again for fear of ever tapping back into the Phoenix, because she has passed it. She got cured. They're able to save her, but now she doesn't ever want to use those powers again for fear that she may tap into the Phoenix Force yet again and unleash hell on Earth. So she doesn't want to touch it. And this gives us a unique situation that has never been explored in either the Fox X-Men nor in X-Men 97, nor in the comic books, actually, because in the comics, after Jean Grey went into the world, killed billions of people from another planet, and then she sacrificed herself in order to die a human rather than live as some type of entity that she cannot control. After she experienced that glorious death, several years later, they retconned it, brought her back to life. And the only way they could bring her back to life, because when she died, she actually disintegrated herself. So the only way they could bring her back to life was by saying that that wasn't Jean Grey. The Phoenix created a clone of Jean Grey and then put the real Jean Grey in some type of stasis. And the moment they said that wasn't Jean Grey, it completely absolved Jean Grey of every wrongdoing the Phoenix had done. Now, the reason why they did that is because when the people who created the Jean Grey Phoenix Saga at the time, Chris Claremont, he wasn't planning on bringing Jean Grey back from the dead. He meant for her to die and stay dead. But years went by, stuff happened, and they wanted to bring her back. And that was the only way to bring her back, was to say that that wasn't her ever in the first place. Because it's hard to come back from disintegration unless that wasn't you. So, like I said, it absolved Jean Grey. So now you have no stakes that Jean Grey has to suffer or no repercussions that Jean Grey has to deal with. So since we have a little bit more foresight in the beginning of our phase, we can actually have this be Jean Grey who embodied Phoenix for a time. And now she did do those kills. And now that she has had the Phoenix be expelled from her, she has to still deal with the repercussions of how it was when she lost control. And knowing that she can possibly have tapped into that Phoenix Force again one day will scare her. Just scare her knowing that this might be the day where she may lose control again. And we get to explore these type of concepts with Jean Grey and the Phoenix nature of Jean Grey. And if for whatever reason we want to bring the Phoenix back one day, it will be a different setup than how other Phoenix sagas were. So people will be engaged because this will be a fresh take that hasn't been explored in none of the medias, including the comics, before. So they will be interested. They would want to know what happened next. Another way you can differentiate, and this would definitely get people back in the seats, because this would get the hardcore fans in an uproar in a good way, would be eventually have Cyclops and Jean get together and have a kid, but have that kid end up being Rachel Summers. Why would this get everybody in a frenzy? Because those who are hardcore, especially X-Men followers, know that Rachel Summers was from the Doom timeline. Her timeline was the one where Days of Future Past actually happened, and the Sentinels ended up killing off not only the majority of the X-Men, but also the Avengers, Fantastic Four, and any other superheroes that stand in its way as it went to world domination. That makes people start wondering, like, wait a minute, hold up. Are you saying the MCU timeline is the Doom timeline? Not everybody's going to be wondering, can we save it? Every movie suddenly has different feel to it, a feel of how we're going to get everything back on track. And every time an obstacle happens that pushes the superheroes back, we question, does this make it even more likely that this Doom timeline will one day happen? And it will always be in the back of our mind as we continue through the storyline to see what happens. And you can always solve it in both ways. You can either, yes, save the day and do something that ensure the Doom timeline does not happen. Or the other thing you can do is, let's say 40 years go down the past and eventually you want to reboot the Marvel Universe, but you want to tie it with this MCU universe. You can then, if you really want to, pull the trigger and say, yes, this was a Doom timeline. However, now that we know what not to do, we have sent somebody in the past, whether it be Rachel Summers or somebody else, to see if they can reset everything and save the MCU. And you can do the same thing to create a rebooted universe. Have somebody go back in time and try to save the future. And then it ends up being different storylines, having Captain America back, Iron Man back, and so forth. 40 years down the line, if you really want to do that. And if you don't want to use it, you can always obviously have the MCU end on a happy note 40, 50 years down the line, or whenever you feel like it may end. Now, another way MCU X-Men can be different than the Fox X-Men and the X-Men 97 is that, especially if you use my pitch of them coming from another world, is that you get to explore how hate is formed from the beginning and how it can become the norm if you allow it to be accepted. You can explore the reasons hate becomes a reality. Because not just simply sometimes that you just look different, I hate you, but it's also usually circumstantial of what burdens you may bring to my livelihood. Because now I have to share my resources with you, or you may have gained resources that I couldn't gain, and so forth and so forth. So this developing and seeing how the hatred can grow can come about and show how we can start telling stories like the Mutant Massacre, or the Holy War, God Loves, Man Kills, or the X-Tinction Agenda. And we get to explore from the ground up how people can be persecuted based on being different than what is considered the norm, and how people like to ostracize so they can become part of the dominant crowd, and by doing so, making a new minority to discriminate. And it always happens that way. So we can play with these elements and then use these elements to show how it affects the larger world. Because obviously what goes on in the X-Men world will, of course, have a larger impact, no matter how you look at it, directly or indirectly, onto the larger world landscape eventually. So we get to see how one plays upon the other, which plays upon the other, which gives us a sense of good world building that we desperately want to continue having within the MCU. Because keep in mind, it cannot just happen in a vacuum. So every time something happens in the mutant world that only the X-Men handles, you can also have a question of Why didn't the Avengers get involved? Why didn't these people help? Or why did they help? Or are they getting lumped in the same group? And we could explore all of it. Because again, especially in the MCU, you don't want things happening in a vacuum. You want things to be independent, but yet at the same time have an effect on the larger world so we can continue growing and expanding the MCU at large. And lastly, the other thing the MCU X-Men can do that Fox's X-Men or X-Men 97 cannot do is that they can show generations. What do I mean by that? Because X-Men 97 is an animation, time plays no strong factor, which means that as long as the drawer's animator's hands are good, and as long as we want to keep that character around, the character can never age out. However, actors in the real world are not like that. We get older and eventually we have to either pass the torch and you have to recast the character or you retire the character and bring somebody else in. And I would say instead of trying to, recast the character, make them ever living, have the characters grow up, have the characters, age out, and then you can start their own generation. Yeah, it can start with Cyclops, Storm, Jean, and so forth. But maybe after a while, you have Kitty Pryde take over and Colossus. And then after a while, you go with some of the New Mutants, Daniel Moonstar. After a while, Pixie. After a while, Hope Summers. And you continue on and on and on. And each way, this time, it gives you a chance for us to know many X-Men in life, many stories that can be told with different characters. And we get to really know all the characters throughout the years. We probably tell 20 years of stories and have great stories within. So there are so many ways that MCU X-Men can be very different than X-Men 97 in good ways where I won't say one would be like the other, but it would be a joy to watch both of them and see how they differ and how they complement each other in ways that are exciting and make you really want to be invested in what comes next, either in Marvel animation or within the MCU X-Men. So those are my thoughts. Those are my ideas. And like I said, if you want to see a little bit more of how you can really get the start portion of it, check out my review or my pitch for the 9 or 10 movies that I had to close out the Marvel Multiverse storyline by bringing in those X-Men and show you how that could have worked. So with that being said, thank you. Thank you for taking a listen to this. Thank you for your time. And I hope you have a great day. And like and subscribe. Stay awesome.